The rains had pounded Beira for 6 days, turning dry streets into sluggish rivers and soccer fields into lakes. Storm drains overflowed. The Pungwe River burst its banks, and the entire fringe of the city looked like the sea had swallowed it. To the local kids, it was chaos, but also adventure. Samuel was 15, lean and wiry, with a bold streak that often landed him in trouble. Just east of the city's outskirts, his neighborhood sat close to the floodplain. He had grown up watching the annual floods reshape the land, used to seeing water creep past the houses, fill the gullies, and submerge playgrounds. When the soccer field at the end of his street disappeared beneath a foot of water, it became an irresistible swimming hole. The rain had paused that afternoon, though gray clouds still hung overhead. The air was thick and wet, and Samuel and 4 friends waded through knee-deep currents and debris-strewn water to reach the old soccer field. The goalposts were barely visible, their top bars peaking like broken bones. The water was brown and opaque, full of runoff, branches, plastic, and swirling trash. They laughed as they splashed, throwing chunks of soaked grass at each other, diving under the surface, daring one another to swim the full length of the flooded pitch. The current was slow but steady, pulling gently eastward, and no one noticed how far they'd strayed toward the deeper corner, where the old drainage ditch fed into the field. Samuel swam out first, powering through the thick, warm water, enjoying the resistance against his arms. He was a strong swimmer, faster than the rest, always eager to lead. Pulling ahead, he felt something hard brush against his leg, but dismissed it as a submerged branch. What he didn't know, what none of them knew, was that the flood had brought more than garbage. The swollen Pungwe had carried fish inland, pushed them into alleys, flooded yards, and shallow lakes. And following those fish was a bull shark. It had likely prowled the brackish estuary when the flood surge pulled it inland. Unlike most sharks, bull sharks could thrive in salt and fresh water, and during the monsoon season, they sometimes ventured far upriver or into floodplains chasing fish and carrion. The debris-choked water gave perfect cover, and the vibrations of the boys splashing were indistinct but unmistakable, erratic, panicked, like wounded prey. The attack happened in seconds. Samuel had just kicked forward when he felt a sudden, massive jolt. Something slammed into his right side, fast and solid, followed instantly by blinding pain in his upper arm. Before he could cry out, he was yanked beneath the surface, twisting violently as the water around him exploded in bubbles. His friends saw the commotion and froze. The water frothed, then turned red. A panicked scream rose as they saw Samuel reappear, thrashing, his body jerking unnaturally. One of the boys ran into the water, gripping his shoulder and dragging him toward the shallow end, while the others backed away in horror. The water stank of blood and mud. Samuel's right arm was a mess of shredded flesh and exposed bone, muscle torn open along the bicep. His face was pale and contorted in shock, but he was conscious, gasping, eyes wild with fear and pain. The bite had been brutal, but not fatal. Only one pass, the shark hitting high and fast, then vanishing into the murk. They pulled him to dry ground, screaming for help. Adults ran from nearby homes, rushing through ankle-deep water as someone called for aid. A volunteer paramedic team stationed nearby in a flood relief tent responded, arriving within 10 minutes with a stretcher. Samuel was pale, bleeding heavily, and beginning to slip out of awareness. The medic tied a tourniquet just below the shoulder and covered the arm in gauze soaked with antiseptic. He was rushed in a utility truck to a field hospital set up on higher ground near the port. Doctors worked quickly. The bite had exposed muscle and severed tendons, but arteries had been narrowly missed. He received a blood transfusion, underwent emergency surgery to repair damaged tissue, and was kept in a makeshift recovery ward. By the next day, he was stable. The incident spread quickly. Rumors flew about crocodiles or spirits in the water, but local marine biologists arrived to clarify. Based on the shape and angle of the bite, wide, crescent-shaped with deep punctures, they confirmed it had come from a bull shark, likely around 2 meters long. They explained that bull sharks often entered rivers during the wet season, and when extreme floods occurred, the boundaries between river and city blurred. The stagnant pools and floodwaters, full of fish and food waste, became accidental hunting grounds. It wasn't the first time. A fisherman near Chinde had been bitten in a similar flood 2 years earlier, but this attack was different. It had happened in an urban zone where children played, not where professionals worked. The government issued immediate warnings against swimming in floodwaters. and search teams patrolled flood zones in boats, keeping eyes open for further shark movement. Authorities considered erecting temporary fencing near key drainage zones to prevent marine life from entering suburban areas. Though with the floods still rising, there were no guarantees. Samuel stayed in the hospital for over a week. He didn't speak much during the first few days. The trauma lingered, deeper than the wound. He would startle when water dripped from a ceiling or wind slapped tarps around the tents. But slowly, he recovered. Doctors said he would regain arm use, though not full strength. When he returned home, his friends greeted him with nervous smiles and relief. The flooded field was still underwater, but now it was avoided, a silent, muddy reminder that the floodwaters were no playground. Samuel's story was retold by parents, teachers, and aid workers as a warning. The boy who survived the flood shark. A living reminder that the ocean's predators don't always wait offshore, that sometimes they follow the rivers, slip between streets, and strike where no one expects them. And for years afterward, when the rains returned and the water rose, those who remembered stayed away from the field because they knew what had once lurked beneath. The coastal waters off Clearwater Beach, Florida, had long been recognized as prime territory for bull shark activity, particularly during summer when water temperatures peaked and bait fish populations swelled near the shoreline. In 2017, these shallow Gulf waters became the site of an unprecedented incident that would fundamentally change United States Coast Guard training protocols for water rescue operations. The area's unique geography, with its gradual sandy bottom and numerous tidal channels, provided ideal hunting grounds for bull sharks, which were known to venture into water as shallow as 3 feet while pursuing prey. Bull sharks, scientifically known as Carcharhinus lucus, are represented by one of the most dangerous shark species due to their aggressive nature and ability to tolerate saltwater and freshwater environments. The Florida Gulf Coast served as a critical habitat for these apex predators, with the warm, nutrient-rich waters supporting large populations year-round. Marine biologists had documented bull sharks reaching lengths of up to 3.5 meters in these waters, with some specimens weighing over 300 kilograms. Petty Officer First Class Donovan Hutchinson had served with the United States Coast Guard for 8 years, specializing in search and rescue operations throughout the Gulf Coast region. At 31 years old, Hutchinson was considered one of the most experienced rescue swimmers at Air Station Clearwater, having participated in over 150 successful rescue missions. His expertise in helicopter hoist operations and water rescue techniques had earned him recognition as a training instructor for recruits entering the Coast Guard's demanding rescue swimmer program. On the afternoon of July 8, 2017, Hutchinson participated in a routine training exercise designed to simulate emergency rescue scenarios in shallow coastal waters. Operation Blue Waters was conducted monthly to maintain crew readiness and test equipment functionality under realistic conditions. The training area, located approximately 2 nautical miles southwest of Clearwater Beach, featured water depths ranging from 8 to 15 feet, making it ideal for practicing the precise hoist operations required in actual emergencies. The exercise involved a HH-60 Jayhawk helicopter from Air Station Clearwater, piloted by Lieutenant Commander Sarah Mitchell, with a crew consisting of Flight Mechanic Chief Petty Officer Marcus Thompson and co-pilot Lieutenant Jake Reynolds. The scenario called for Hutchinson to be lowered from the hovering aircraft via rescue basket, simulate the retrieval of a distressed swimmer using a training dummy, and then be hoisted back aboard the helicopter while carrying the simulated victim. Weather conditions for the training exercise were optimal: clear skies, light winds from the southwest at 8 knots, and sea surface temperatures registering 28 degrees Celsius. Visibility was excellent, with the crew observing the sandy bottom through the emerald-colored water. The helicopter maintained a standard rescue hover 40 feet above the surface, positioning itself according to established protocols for shallow water operations. Hutchinson completed the initial descent and water entry, demonstrating proper technique as he detached from the rescue basket and began the simulated victim recovery process. He maneuvered the 80-kilogram training dummy into the basket and signaled the helicopter crew to begin the hoist operation. The exercise had proceeded flawlessly up to this point, with all crew members performing their assigned duties precisely. As the hoist began lifting Hutchinson and the training dummy toward the helicopter, he followed standard procedure, gripping the rescue basket supporting cables rather than the basket itself. This technique allowed him to control the simulated victim while being lifted through the water column. The helicopter maintained its hover as the hoist mechanism gradually raised the load toward the aircraft's open door. When Hutchinson reached approximately 8 feet above the water surface, still well within the range where spray from the helicopter's rotor wash created surface turbulence, the bull shark struck. The predator, estimated to be approximately 2.8 meters long and weighing nearly 200 kilograms, had been attracted to the training area by the unusual disturbance created by the helicopter's presence and the repeated entry and exit of equipment from the water. The shark's attack was swift and precise, with the animal launching partially out of the water to reach Hutchinson's dangling legs. Its powerful jaws clamped down on his right leg just above the ankle, the razor-sharp teeth immediately penetrating his dry suit and tearing into the flesh beneath. Hutchinson felt the crushing pressure of the bite and the grinding sensation as the shark's teeth scraped against the bones in his lower leg. The attack lasted approximately 12 seconds, during which the shark's weight and thrashing movements created tremendous strain on both Hutchinson and the hoist mechanism. The rescue swimmer experienced excruciating pain as the shark's bite fractured his fibula and caused severe soft tissue damage to his calf muscle. Blood immediately began flowing from the multiple puncture wounds, creating a visible red cloud in the water below. Flight mechanic Thompson, monitoring the hoist operation from the helicopter's door, immediately recognized the emergency and rapidly retrieved the hoist cable. The increased speed of the ascent caused the bull shark to release its grip and splash back into the water, where it briefly circled the area before disappearing into the deeper channel nearby. Hutchinson was pulled into the helicopter within 30 seconds of the attack, where Thompson and Reynolds immediately began administering first aid. The crew applied pressure bandages to control the bleeding while establishing radio contact with emergency medical services. Hutchinson remained conscious throughout the incident, providing crucial information about his condition and the nature of his injuries. Lieutenant Commander Mitchell immediately diverted the aircraft to a medical center in St. Petersburg, the closest trauma facility equipped to handle severe shark bite injuries. The flight took 18 minutes, during which the crew maintained constant communication with hospital emergency staff and continued monitoring Hutchinson's vital signs. His injuries included multiple deep puncture wounds, a fractured fibula, severe muscle damage, and significant blood loss. Emergency room physicians at the medical center performed immediate surgery to clean and repair the damaged tissue, set the fractured bone, and address potential infection from marine bacteria. Over the following week, Hutchinson underwent 3 separate surgical procedures to reconstruct the damaged muscle tissue and ensure proper healing of the bone fractures. The incident prompted immediate reviews of Coast Guard training protocols, particularly regarding rescue operations in known shark habitats. New guidelines required marine life spotting procedures before conducting water rescue training, and equipment modifications included the development of shark deterrent devices for use during rescue operations. Hutchinson eventually returned to active duty after 6 months of rehabilitation, though he was reassigned to shore-based operations at his request. The waters off Tofo Beach in Mozambique had gained a reputation among thrill-seekers as one of the premier destinations for cage diving with great white sharks. The coastal town, situated along the Indian Ocean, approximately 500 kilometers northeast of Maputo, had transformed from a sleepy fishing village into a bustling hub for marine tourism over the past decade. The warm Agulhas current that swept along this coastline created perfect conditions for diverse marine life, including the apex predators that drew adventurous tourists worldwide. Irina Volkov, a 32-year-old marine engineer from St. Petersburg, had traveled to Mozambique specifically for this experience. She had spent months researching dive operators and had chosen Apex Marine Adventures based on their supposed safety record and modern equipment. The company operated from a converted Southern Cross fishing vessel, which had been retrofitted with specialized winches and diving platforms designed for cage operations. The morning of June 15th dawned clear and calm, with gentle swells rolling in from the southeast. Captain Manuel Ferreira, a weathered local running diving operations for 15 years, briefed the 6 tourists aboard his vessel. He explained that they would be heading to a site known locally as Ponta do Tubarão, Shark Point, where recent fish migrations had attracted several large predators. Irina listened intently as the dive master, a South African named Craig Hendricks, demonstrated the safety procedures. The steel cage measured roughly 3 meters by 2 meters, with gaps between the bars too narrow for a shark to penetrate. Hendricks assured the group that in his 8 years of operation, no cage had ever been breached by a shark. The Southern Cross is anchored in 35 meters of water and is approximately 8 kilometers from shore. The crew began preparing the bait line, a mixture of fish blood and chunks of yellowfin tuna designed to attract sharks from a distance. Within 20 minutes of deploying the bait, the first dorsal fin appeared on the surface, cutting through the water with unmistakable purpose. Irina volunteered to be the first diver of the day. She donned her wetsuit and breathing apparatus while Hendricks performed final safety checks on the cage. The structure appeared solid, and its welded joints showed no signs of stress or corrosion. The cage had 2 emergency air supplies and a quick-release mechanism that could be activated inside. At precisely 11:47 a.m., the cage descended into the crystalline waters. Irina gripped the interior bars as the ocean closed over her head, the surface noise fading to an ethereal silence, broken only by the rhythmic sound of her breathing apparatus. Schools of yellowfin tuna moved in tight formations around the cage, their silver bodies flashing in the filtered sunlight. The first great white appeared like a gray ghost from the deep blue void. The shark measured approximately 4.5 meters in length, its scarred hide suggesting an experienced predator. It circled the cage with casual curiosity, occasionally bumping the structure with its snout in exploratory behavior that Hendricks had described as completely normal. However, what emerged from the depths 10 minutes later was anything but normal. A second great white, significantly larger than the first, rose from below with unmistakable aggression. This shark measured well over 5 meters in length, its massive bulk dwarfing the cage as it approached. Its behavior immediately differed from that of the first shark. Instead of a curious investigation, this predator showed signs of agitation and territorial dominance. The giant shark made its first contact with the cage at 12:03 p.m. Rather than the gentle bump typical of exploratory behavior, it struck the structure with tremendous force, the impact reverberating through the water and causing Irina to lose her grip on the interior bars. The cage swayed violently on its cable, spinning slowly as the shark circled for another approach. Hendricks, monitoring from the surface through an underwater camera system, immediately radioed Captain Ferreira to begin hauling the cage upward. However, before the winch could engage, the massive shark launched at the cage with unprecedented fury. Its jaws, easily a meter wide when fully opened, clamped down on the corner section where 2 support bars met at a welded joint. The sound of twisting metal carried through the water as the shark's bite force, estimated at over 1,800 kilograms per square inch, began to deform the steel bars. Irina watched in horror as the supposedly impenetrable barrier began to buckle under the relentless pressure. The shark thrashed its head from side to side, working the metal like a dog with a bone, its black eyes showing no emotion as it systematically destroyed the cage's integrity. Within seconds, a gap appeared between 2 bent bars, an opening just wide enough for the shark's massive head to penetrate. The predator immediately exploited this weakness, forcing its way partially into the cage with terrifying determination. Irina pressed herself against the opposite corner, but the cage's confines offered no real escape. The shark's jaws snapped shut around Irina's left leg just above the knee. The crushing pressure was immediate and devastating, the serrated teeth penetrating through her wetsuit and into flesh and bone. She could feel herself being pulled toward the breach in the cage as the shark attempted to extract its prize from the twisted metal structure. Above, the crew had finally engaged the winch and hauled the compromised cage toward the surface as quickly as possible. The cable strained under the additional weight of the massive shark, which continued its assault even as it was lifted from its natural element. Hendricks dove into the water with a bang stick, a short spear designed to deliver an explosive charge, while 2 other crew members prepared emergency medical equipment. The shark released its grip on Irina just as the cage broke the surface, possibly startled by the sudden change in environment and the frantic activity of the boat crew. Irina collapsed inside the mangled cage, blood streaming from severe lacerations on her left leg and side where the shark's teeth had found their mark. The rescue operation took less than 3 minutes from when the cage surfaced until Irina was aboard the Southern Cross. Captain Ferreira immediately activated his emergency beacon and radioed for medical evacuation, while crew members applied pressure bandages to stem the bleeding. Irina remained conscious throughout the ordeal, though she was clearly in shock from blood loss and trauma. A helicopter from a provincial hospital in Inhambane arrived within 45 minutes and transported Irina to the trauma center in Maputo. Surgeons worked for 8 hours to repair the damage to her leg, managing to save the limb despite significant muscle and nerve damage. Her recovery would require months of physical therapy, but she had survived an attack that easily could have been fatal. The incident prompted immediate investigation by Mozambican maritime authorities and temporarily suspended cage diving operations along the coast. Analysis of the damaged cage revealed that the failed welded joint showed microscopic stress fractures, likely caused by repeated impacts that weakened the structure beyond safe operating limits. Irina eventually returned to Russia, carrying both physical and psychological scars from her encounter with one of the ocean's most formidable predators. The attack became a case study in marine tourism safety, highlighting the inherent risks of placing humans close to apex predators, regardless of supposed protective measures. Bay, located along the southern coast of South Africa near Cape Town, has long been recognized as one of the world's most active great white shark territories. In May 2025, this stretch of water between the Cape Peninsula and the Hottentots Holland Mountains would become the site of a harrowing survival story that would capture international attention. The bay, known for its seal colonies at Seal Island and frequent shark sightings, had been a popular destination for marine tourism and research for decades. However, its reputation as a feeding ground for apex predators made it one of the most dangerous waters in the world for unexpected encounters. The helicopter, a chartered Bell 407 operated by Coastal Airways, had departed from Cape Town International Airport on the morning of May 24, 2025, carrying 6 passengers on what was supposed to be a routine scenic flight over the Cape Peninsula. The passengers included Thaddeus Pemberton, a wildlife photographer from London; Ximena Valdez, a marine conservation journalist from Mexico; Quentin Blackwood, a retired engineer from Australia; Serafina Kowalski, a marine biology student from Poland; Dmitry Volkov, a Russian oligarch's son; and Cordelia Ashworth, a British documentary filmmaker. Captain Reginald Thornbury, a veteran pilot with over 15 years of experience flying coastal routes, had reported perfect weather conditions during the pre-flight check. The helicopter was scheduled to follow the scenic route along the coast, providing passengers with aerial views of the notorious Seal Island before returning to Cape Town. However, approximately 40 minutes into the flight, while hovering over False Bay at an altitude of 800 feet, the aircraft experienced a catastrophic mechanical failure. Witnesses on fishing boats in the area later reported hearing a loud grinding noise, followed by the distinctive sound of rotor blades hitting the fuselage. The helicopter began spinning uncontrollably before plummeting toward the choppy waters below. Captain Thornbury initiated emergency protocols, but the aircraft hit the water with tremendous force, breaking apart on impact. The fuselage immediately began taking on water in the rough seas. All 6 passengers and the pilot initially survived the crash, managing to evacuate the sinking aircraft and cling to floating debris. The water temperature was approximately 14 degrees Celsius, and the survivors found themselves scattered across a debris field roughly 50 meters wide. Pemberton had sustained a dislocated shoulder during the impact, while Valdez suffered a deep gash on her forehead from flying debris. The others had various cuts and bruises but were conscious and could stay afloat. Captain Thornbury had sent a distress signal before the crash, and rescue teams were dispatched from Simonstown Naval Base. However, the rescue operation faced delays due to rough sea conditions and the remote location of the crash site. The survivors would spend nearly 4 hours in the water before help arrived. The first fin appeared during the 3rd hour of their ordeal. Despite her exhaustion and hypothermia, Serafina Kowalski was the first to spot the distinctive triangular dorsal fin cutting through the water approximately 30 meters away. She warned the others, but her voice was barely audible over the sound of the waves and wind. The great white shark, estimated to be between 4 and 5 meters long, had likely been attracted to the crash site by the water's vibrations and possible fuel spillage. The predator began circling the debris field, its movements becoming increasingly aggressive as it investigated the unusual disturbance in its territory. Dmitry Volkov, who had been clinging to a piece of the helicopter's door, was the first to be attacked. The shark approached from below and behind, its powerful jaws clamping down on his right leg just above the ankle. Volkov screamed as the shark's serrated teeth tore through his wetsuit and into his flesh, causing deep lacerations and fracturing his fibula. The shark released him after several seconds, likely confused by the taste of neoprene and human flesh. The attack on Volkov triggered a feeding frenzy response in the shark. Within minutes, it had targeted Quentin Blackwood, who was floating approximately 20 meters away. The shark's second attack was more violent, with the predator launching partially out of the water before clamping down on Blackwood's left arm. The engineer's radius and ulna were both fractured, and he lost consciousness briefly from the pain and shock. Cordelia Ashworth became the third victim when the shark approached her from the side, its jaws closing around her right thigh. The bite caused severe muscle damage and multiple deep puncture wounds, though the shark again released her quickly. The attack left her unable to swim effectively, and she was only kept afloat by her life jacket. Despite his dislocated shoulder, Pemberton attempted to create distance between himself and the shark by swimming toward a larger piece of debris. However, the movement attracted the predator's attention, and he was bitten on his left calf. The shark's teeth punctured his gastrocnemius muscle and caused significant blood loss. Valdez and Kowalski were attacked almost simultaneously during the shark's final assault. Valdez sustained bites to her right arm and shoulder, while Kowalski suffered injuries to both legs. The marine biology student later reported feeling the shark's sandpaper-like skin scraping against her during the attack. The shark's behavior was consistent with investigative biting rather than predatory feeding. Marine biologists who later studied the incident noted that the relatively quick release of each victim suggested the shark was confused by the unusual situation and was attempting to identify the strange objects in its territory. Rescue helicopters finally arrived at the scene as the shark disappeared into the deeper waters of the bay. All 6 survivors, together with the pilot, were airlifted to a hospital in Cape Town, where they received emergency medical treatment. Despite their severe injuries, all passengers survived the ordeal. The incident prompted immediate investigations into helicopter safety protocols and emergency response procedures for maritime crashes in shark-infested waters. The attack remains one of the most documented cases of multiple shark bite victims from a single incident in South African waters. Waters off Baja California were deceptively calm that morning, the sea painted glassy blue under a rising sun. Lucia had always loved these quiet hours, when the ocean was still, and the only sounds were soft waves lapping against the hull and distant seabirds crying over the horizon. At 31, she was already a respected marine ecologist from Spain, with nearly a decade of fieldwork behind her. She had dived with orcas, tagged manta rays, and swum among whales. But this was different. This was solitude. The research team had anchored near a deep-water buoy, one of several scattered along the migratory corridor used by humpbacks. Their modest but well-equipped vessel was home base for a 2-week expedition that recorded whale song, tracked surface movement, and monitored plankton blooms in the channel's upwellings. Lucia, ever dedicated, rose early that day. She wanted to recalibrate an acoustic sensor tethered to the buoy before the winds picked up. No one else was awake when she lowered herself quietly into the water with mask and fins, towing a waterproof notepad and small toolkit. Her movements were careful, practiced, and confident. The buoy was positioned just above the edge of a submarine canyon that dropped steeply into colder, deeper water, a place rich with prey and known, though rarely spoken of directly, as an occasional hunting ground for large predators. Lucia was aware of the risks. She had read the local briefings, reviewed migration data, and listened to accounts of divers who had seen shadows slipping below them just out of view. Still, the water felt safe in the quiet of early morning. With visibility stretching dozens of meters, she worked beneath the buoy, tightening a loose sensor bracket, noting small corrosion patches, and marking calibration values. It was simple and routine, and she moved slowly as she adjusted her orientation. She floated just under the surface, the lines from the buoy occasionally brushing against her arm. What she didn't notice was how far she had drifted. The current had gently pulled her away from the shallow shelf and over the canyon lip. The water darkened below her, turning from turquoise to an inkier shade of blue. Somewhere deep in that darkness, a shadow rose. It was a great white female, nearly 4 meters long. It had likely been patrolling the edge of the drop-off, drawn closer by the rhythmic splashing near the buoy. The silhouette of Lucia's body above, combined with the shadow of the floating structure, resembled a distressed animal, perhaps a seal or injured fish. She didn't hear it approach. Only a sudden and sharp scream echoed across the water just once. Her colleagues, still half asleep aboard the nearby vessel, jolted upright. 2 rushed onto the deck and scanned the surface. For a few seconds there was nothing, just empty water and the quiet bobbing of the buoy. Then something red. Lucia's body surfaced near the buoy, floating awkwardly. One fin still on her right foot, arms drifting loosely beside her. Her left leg was gone above the knee, torn away entirely. The left side of her back bore deep, ragged gashes, flesh stripped down to exposed ribs. The team launched the skiff and retrieved her within minutes, but she was already dead. The blood loss had been massive. One of the researchers, shaking, flew a drone to scan the surrounding area. Within seconds, it captured footage of a large shark circling lazily beneath the buoy, its body smooth and pale beneath the surface sheen. The animal was slow now, having already delivered its strike and withdrawn. It showed no fear, no urgency, just silent dominance in its domain. The team reported the incident immediately. Authorities, journalists, and marine biologists from the mainland arrived by helicopter within hours. The footage was reviewed. Based on the bite pattern, footage, and local movement data, the shark was identified as a mature female great white, known to patrol the deeper sections of the trench during peak feeding times. Lucia had not been wearing a shark deterrent, though several were available on board. The device, a simple magnetic field emitter, was standard protocol for deeper excursions, but she had considered her snorkel near the buoy low risk. She had also gone alone, something typically discouraged during offshore work even in familiar waters. The Mexican scientific community was shaken. Lucia was not just another name on a list. She had been a rising figure in marine biology, respected for her field discipline and known for her cautious approach. But even caution had limits. The fact that the attack happened near a monitored buoy raised troubling questions. Did the buoy attract prey that lured the shark closer? Did its shadow confuse the predator into thinking it was an injured animal hiding beneath? Was the water simply too deep for comfort, too close to the hunting ground, too far from the protective rhythms of the surface pods? A week later, her body was flown back to Spain, escorted by 2 colleagues who had worked closely with her on whale tagging projects. A memorial was held at her home institute, where students and mentors spoke about her passion for the sea, her calm under pressure, and her relentless drive to understand the creatures she loved. Back in Baja, the team removed the buoy. Further dives in the canyon zone were indefinitely suspended, and new regulations were drafted mandating paired excursions and mandatory deterrent use during solo tasks, no matter how shallow. The attack did not diminish Lucia's legacy, but altered how others approached the sea. For all her knowledge, she had become part of the very food chain she studied, and that cold truth hung over every diver who later entered those same waters, reminding them that even the most experienced could be mistaken for prey. In time, the ocean grew quiet again. The winds returned, the whales resumed their migrations, and the sharks kept to their patterns. But under the surface, where shadows move without sound, Lucia's story remained, a solemn echo of risk, reverence, and the ever-thin line between study and survival. The waters off Queensland's coast near Cairns, Australia, have served as a natural laboratory for marine researchers studying the behavior of tiger sharks for over 3 decades. In 2019, these tropical waters, part of the Great Barrier Reef Marine Park, became the site of an unprecedented incident that would forever change safety protocols for cage diving operations. The region's warm currents and abundant marine life have made it a premier destination for scientific research and ecotourism. Tiger sharks are one of the most sought-after species for underwater observation. Tiger sharks, known scientifically as Galiocerdo cuvier, are among the ocean's most formidable predators, capable of growing up to 5 meters long and weighing over 600 kilograms. The Queensland coast provided ideal hunting grounds for these apex predators, with its coral reefs offering shelter for prey species and its deeper channels serving as migration routes. The area had been extensively studied since the 1980s, with researchers documenting feeding patterns, mating behaviors, and territorial movements of the local tiger shark population. Jake Meridian, a marine biologist from the Institute of Marine Sciences in Australia, had been conducting research on tiger shark feeding behavior for his doctoral thesis. At 28 years old, Jake had already spent over 200 hours in underwater observation cages, studying shark behavior in various locations across the Pacific. His research focused on how environmental factors influenced hunting patterns, and he had developed a reputation for his methodical approach to data collection and his calm demeanor underwater. On the morning of September 15, 2019, Jake joined a research expedition aboard the vessel Southern Cross, operated by Reef Encounters Marine Research. The team planned to conduct behavioral observations of tiger sharks using a specially designed reinforced steel cage tested in similar conditions across Australian waters. The cage, manufactured by Deep Blue Marine Equipment, was constructed from 25mm steel bars and had been certified to withstand encounters with sharks up to 6 meters in length. The research site was located approximately 15 nautical miles northeast of Cairns, in waters roughly 40 meters deep. The location had been chosen based on previous tracking data that indicated regular tiger shark activity in the area. The team lowered the cage to a depth of 12 meters, with Jake inside wearing full scuba equipment and carrying underwater cameras and measurement devices. The initial phase of the dive proceeded according to protocol. Jake observed 2 smaller tiger sharks, approximately 2.5 meters long, as they investigated the bait containers suspended near the cage. He documented their approach patterns and feeding responses, noting their cautious behavior around the unfamiliar structure. The sharks maintained a respectful distance from the cage, occasionally bumping the bars with their snouts before swimming away. After approximately 45 minutes underwater, a significantly larger tiger shark appeared from the deeper waters beyond the reef. Jake estimated the shark to be at least 4.5 meters long, with distinctive dark stripes across its gray body and a massive head indicating it was likely a mature female. The shark's behavior immediately differed from that of the smaller individuals Jake had observed. Rather than showing caution, the large female displayed territorial aggression toward the cage. The shark began circling the cage at close range, its movements becoming increasingly erratic as it investigated the bait containers. Jake noticed that the shark's body language suggested heightened agitation, with its pectoral fins held downward and its swimming pattern becoming more rigid. He began preparing to signal the surface team for an early ascent when the shark suddenly accelerated toward the cage. The impact was unlike anything Jake had experienced in his years of cage diving. The tiger shark struck the steel bars with tremendous force, causing the structure to rock violently. The initial collision bent 2 vertical bars, creating an approximately 30-centimeter wide gap. Jake immediately moved to the opposite side of the cage, but the shark was far from finished with its assault. Enraged by the cage's resistance, the female tiger shark launched a second attack within seconds. This time she approached from a different angle, using her powerful tail to generate maximum force. The impact caused the weakened bars to separate further, creating an opening large enough for the shark to thrust her massive head inside the cage. Jake found himself face to face with the shark's gaping mouth, rows of serrated teeth visible just meters away. He pressed himself against the back of the cage as the shark pushed deeper into the opening, her powerful body thrashing as she attempted to reach him. The shark's head and shoulders were now inside the cage, and Jake could feel the water displacement from her powerful movements. In a desperate attempt to escape the shark's reach, Jake tried to move toward the cage's upper section. However, as he lifted his left arm, the shark's jaws snapped closed around his forearm with crushing force. Jake felt the immediate shock of the bite as the shark's teeth penetrated his wetsuit and tore into his flesh. The pain was excruciating, and he could feel the bones in his arm crack under the pressure. The shark held Jake's arm for approximately 8 seconds before releasing him and backing out of the damaged cage. Jake immediately signaled frantically to the surface team while applying pressure to his wounded arm. Blood was flowing freely from multiple puncture wounds, and he could see that his radius bone had been fractured. The surface team quickly initiated emergency procedures, hauling the damaged cage to the surface within minutes. Jake was immediately transferred to the boat's medical station, where the crew administered first aid and radioed for emergency medical evacuation. A rescue helicopter arrived within 30 minutes and transported Jake to a hospital in Cairns, where surgeons performed emergency surgery to repair the damaged tissue and set his fractured bones. Jake's recovery took several months, but he eventually returned to marine research. The incident led to comprehensive reviews of cage diving safety protocols and the development of stronger cage designs. The tiger shark's unprecedented behavior was attributed to possible territorial protection of a nearby feeding area, highlighting the unpredictable nature of apex predator encounters. By 2022, the North Malay Atoll in the Maldives had become a premier destination for diving certification programs. Located 600 kilometers southwest of India, this pristine marine environment attracted diving enthusiasts worldwide seeking certification and conservation education. Ocean Echo Dive Base, established on Thulustu Island, has built a reputation for combining technical training with marine ecosystem awareness. On July 8, 2022, 12 students celebrated their completion of their advanced open water certification aboard the catamaran Ocean Explorer. The graduation party represented the culmination of an intensive 2-week program that challenged students technically and academically. Among the celebrating divers was Rajiv Kumar, a 28-year-old software engineer from Mumbai, who had demonstrated exceptional skill and safety awareness throughout his training. Captain Ahmed Rashid had anchored the vessel at Hammerhead Point, where the shallow reef system dropped dramatically into deep ocean waters. This location was specifically chosen for its spectacular marine life and the possibility of encountering larger pelagic species that typically remained in deeper waters beyond the atoll. The celebration included a final dive at 3:00 p.m. Perfect conditions featured minimal current, 30-meter visibility, and a comfortable 28-degree water temperature. Kumar joined the first group of 6 divers, accompanied by Chief Instructor Lars Anderson and Assistant Instructor Priya Nair. The dive plan called for exploring the reef wall at a maximum depth of 25 meters. As the group descended along the dramatic reef wall, Kumar positioned himself slightly apart from the others to photograph a large sea fan coral formation. The underwater scenery was spectacular, with vibrant corals creating a vertical garden against the deep blue backdrop of the open ocean. At 3:35 p.m., while at 18 meters depth, Instructor Anderson noticed unusual behavior among the reef fish. Schools of fusiliers and snappers feeding casually suddenly became agitated, forming tighter groups and seeking shelter within the coral formations. Anderson recognized this as a potential predator and began scanning the surrounding water. The oceanic white-tip shark appeared from the deeper water with characteristic boldness. The shark was approximately 2.5 meters long and displayed the species' distinctive white-tipped fins and confident demeanor. Unlike typical reef sharks that maintain respectful distances from divers, this oceanic white-tip approached directly, showing clear investigative behavior. Anderson immediately signaled the group to remain calm and avoid sudden movements. The shark initially circled at a distance of 10 meters, apparently assessing the divers. However, its attention focused specifically on Kumar, who was positioned apart from the main group. Kumar noticed the approach and followed his training by maintaining eye contact while slowly backing toward the group. His movement triggered aggressive behavior from the predator, which suddenly accelerated toward him with predatory intent. At 3:38 p.m., the oceanic white-tip struck Kumar's right calf with significant force, its teeth penetrating his wetsuit into muscle tissue. Kumar reacted appropriately, striking the shark's snout with his camera housing while kicking to create distance. The impact startled the predator, which released its grip and backed away. Anderson and Nair responded immediately, moving to Kumar's position while monitoring the shark's behavior. The predator continued circling, but appeared deterred by the coordinated group response. The emergency ascent followed proper procedures, with Kumar maintaining pressure on his wound while the instructors assisted. The oceanic white-tip followed during ascent, but maintained distance, disappearing into deeper water as they approached the surface. Kumar was brought aboard within minutes, where Captain Rashid implemented emergency medical procedures using marine-specific first aid supplies. The planned evening celebration was cancelled as the group returned to Thulusdu for medical treatment. Kumar's wound required sutures and antibiotics, but his proper training had prevented serious injury. His recovery took 2 weeks, after which he returned to diving with heightened awareness of shark behavior. The incident became a valuable teaching example for future classes, demonstrating marine wildlife's unpredictability and the importance of emergency response training. Waters off Stewart Island were cold, dark, and alive with movement, even on a calm day. Hannah had dived in many parts of the world, but respected this place more than most. At 36, she was experienced, careful, and quietly confident. She had logged hundreds of hours underwater, from tropical reefs to murky temperate zones. But this dive was different. It was a drift dive in one of the world's more unpredictable marine environments, where strong currents could push even the most seasoned diver far from the group, and where great whites were more than a distant possibility. She had flown into New Zealand a week earlier to join a small, tightly managed dive tour known for its wildlife encounters. The group consisted of 5 divers and 2 guides, all briefed thoroughly that morning. The goal was to ride a long, slow current through a narrow channel dotted with kelp forests and steep rock faces, a habitat known for seals, rays, and occasionally large predators. The first part of the dive went smoothly. The water was cold enough to numb fingers, but visibility was fair. Hannah floated effortlessly with the current, drifting past thick strands of bull kelp swaying like underwater trees. She kept her breathing slow and her limbs steady, enjoying the weightlessness and silence. Then, without much warning, the current shifted. It tugged harder, sweeping her slightly off to the right, away from the cluster of divers. She kicked gently, adjusting her buoyancy, but didn't panic. She could still see faint shadows through the water, but they were drifting at a different angle now, and she began to lose them behind a curtain of kelp. For a few seconds, she floated alone. That was when she felt it. Something massive surged from the gloom below, a shape so fast and deliberate it seemed to rise out of nowhere. A great white, nearly 4 meters long, had locked onto her movement. Isolated and drifting, she had become a singular object in the current, an anomaly. The shark rose with terrifying power, its white belly catching the filtered light, and before she could even think to react, it bit. Its jaws clamped around her left thigh, crushing wetsuit, muscle, and bone in a single motion. The pressure was overwhelming, a blast of pain so intense it turned into cold shock. The shark shook once, hard, tossing her like a rag doll in the water. Her regulator almost slipped from her mouth. Then, as suddenly as it had come, the shark let go. Blood clouded the water in wide ribbons as the great white turned and vanished into the blue, leaving only silence and pain behind. Hannah was conscious, barely. She looked down and saw her leg torn and streaming dark red, her wetsuit shredded, and bubbles escaping in bursts from her gear. Panic hovered at the edge of her thoughts, but instinct took over. She reached for the inflator on her vest and pressed it. Slowly, her body began to rise, her vision blurred. She kicked feebly with her good leg, drifting toward the surface, hoping she wouldn't pass out. She had no idea where the others were. She didn't know if the shark would come back. On the surface, one of the guides had just completed a scan of the dive site when he spotted the sudden plume of blood. He raised the alarm, and the boat spun toward the source. A diver was ascending alone. The crew reached her within seconds, pulling her limp body from the water. Her face was pale, her eyes glassy, but she was alive. Blood poured from the torn leg. One of the guides, a trained medic, clamped his hands around the wound and shouted for the tourniquet kit. The others scrambled to stabilize her. She didn't speak, just groaned faintly as they secured her leg and covered her in dry blankets. The bite had torn through most of her thigh, exposing muscle and rupturing veins. Her femur was intact, barely, but she was losing blood fast. They radioed for a helicopter and headed full speed back to the mainland. The airlift team met them near the dock. Paramedics transferred Hannah to a stretcher and began a transfusion en route to a hospital. She drifted in and out of consciousness, her body shaking, her mind floating somewhere between fear and numbness. Over the next week, Hannah underwent multiple surgeries. Doctors repaired muscle, sealed arteries, and cleaned the massive wound. Miraculously, no infection set in. With time and careful treatment, the tissue began to heal. Nerve damage was limited, and though her leg would never quite be the same, she would walk again. The incident sent shockwaves through the diving community. Great white sightings near Stewart Island weren't uncommon, but actual attacks were rare. The fact that the shark had struck during a controlled dive and released after a single bite led experts to conclude it had likely mistaken her for a seal or drifting carcass. Her isolated movement in the current made her an easy target. The dive company suspended operations for the season. New safety measures were proposed. More precise diver tracking, mandatory buddy tethers during strong current dives, and stricter protocols for visibility loss. Hannah stayed in New Zealand for her recovery. She spent 6 weeks regaining strength, gradually learning to use her leg again. The pain was sharp at first, but her resolve never broke. She had always respected the ocean, and now that respect had deepened into something more, a recognition that nature remained wild and unsparing even in places of beauty. Months later, she returned to diving in warmer waters near Queensland. It wasn't easy. Her heart pounded harder, her gear felt heavier, and every shadow beneath her made her breath catch. But she kept going. She descended slowly, this time in calm seas, surrounded by others. She didn't drift far. She didn't let her eyes wander. She moved carefully, deliberately, like someone who had learned how thin the line could be. And she found peace in that silent world beneath the waves, not because the fear was gone, but because she had survived it. The secluded cove near Hermanus, South Africa, had remained largely undiscovered by mainstream tourism until 2018, when residents began sharing its pristine beauty through social media. Located approximately 15 kilometers southeast of the town center, the small bay was accessible only through a narrow hiking trail wound through fynbos vegetation and granite outcroppings. The area, known locally as Klip Bay, had been a favorite swimming spot for generations of local families who appreciated its crystal-clear waters and protection from the strong Atlantic swells that battered the main coastline. The cove's geological formation provided natural protection from prevailing winds, creating an almost lagoon-like environment that appeared deceptively safe. Rocky formations on either side of the 200-meter-wide bay channeled deeper ocean currents through an underwater passage connected directly to the main shipping lanes. While invisible from the surface, this underwater topography created an ideal hunting corridor for great white sharks, moving between their feeding areas around Seal Island and the kelp forests further east. Mark Stevens, a 34-year-old software engineer from Cape Town, had discovered Klip Bay during a hiking expedition 6 months earlier. The divorced father of one had been searching for quiet locations where he could spend quality time with his 8-year-old son, Timothy, away from the crowds and commercialization of the popular beaches. Mark had grown up swimming in the ocean and considered himself an experienced swimmer, having completed several open-water swimming events, including the Robben Island Crossing. On the morning of March 12, 2018, Mark and Timothy made the 90-minute drive from Cape Town to Hermanus, planning to spend the day exploring tide pools and swimming in the protected cove. The weather conditions were ideal, with light offshore winds, clear skies, and water temperature around 18 degrees Celsius. Mark had packed a picnic lunch, snorkeling gear, and safety equipment, including a first aid kit and emergency beacon, demonstrating his usual cautious approach to outdoor activities. The pair arrived at the trailhead shortly after 9 a.m. and completed the 45-minute hike to the cove without incident. Timothy, an energetic child who had inherited his father's love of the ocean, was excited about swimming in what Mark had described as their secret beach. The cove appeared exactly as Mark had remembered it: pristine white sand, clear turquoise water, and complete solitude. Mark conducted his usual safety assessment of the swimming area, checking for rip currents, rocky hazards, and water clarity. The conditions appeared perfect, with excellent visibility extending to at least 20 meters and gentle waves barely reaching knee height. He established a safe swimming boundary approximately 30 meters from shore, marking it with a floating buoy he had brought. Father and son spent the first hour exploring the rocky tide pools at the cove's edges. Timothy was delighted to discover small crabs, sea anemones, and colorful fish trapped in the natural aquariums. Mark photographed his son's discoveries, capturing moments that would later become precious memories. The morning's activities proceeded exactly as Mark had planned. creating the perfect father-son bonding experience he had hoped for. Around 11 a.m., as the sun reached its peak intensity, Mark suggested they cool off with a swim. Timothy, still learning to swim confidently in open water, remained in the shallow areas near shore, content to splash and play in water, barely reaching his waist. Feeling confident in the safe conditions, Mark decided to swim toward the buoy he had placed earlier. Mark was approximately 40 meters from shore, well within his comfort zone, when he paused to wave at Timothy and check on his son's activities. The water was so clear that he could see the sandy bottom beneath him, and he floated on his back for a moment, enjoying the warmth of the sun and the peaceful surroundings. From Timothy's perspective on the beach, his father appeared to be having a relaxing swim in perfect conditions. The attack came without warning. Timothy later told rescue workers that his father had been floating calmly one moment and suddenly disappeared beneath the surface in an explosion of white water and foam. The child initially thought his father was playing a game, perhaps diving down to look at something on the bottom, but the thrashing water and the appearance of a large, dark shape convinced him that something was wrong. Marine biologists estimate that the great white shark, between 4.5 and 5 meters in length, approached Mark directly below, likely using the sun's position to mask its approach. The attack was characteristic of great white hunting behavior in the region, with the shark breaching partially out of the water as it struck its target. Mark disappeared beneath the surface immediately, and the churning water made it impossible for Timothy to see what was happening below. Timothy began screaming for his father and ran along the water's edge, hoping to spot him swimming back to shore. After several minutes of frantic calling, the child activated the emergency beacon his father had taught him to use, though he was uncertain whether it was working properly. The boy remained on the beach for over 2 hours, alternately calling for his father and scanning the water for any sign of his return. The rescue vessels arrived at the cove shortly after 2 p.m., alerted by the emergency beacon signal. The South African Rescue Institute dispatched boats from Hermanus, while emergency medical services accessed the cove via the hiking trail. Rescue divers found Mark's body in approximately 15 meters of water, roughly 100 meters from where the attack had occurred. The post-mortem examination revealed that Mark had sustained massive trauma, consistent with a great white shark attack, with fatal injuries to his torso and legs. Marine biologists noted that the attack pattern suggested predatory behavior rather than territorial aggression, indicating that the shark had likely mistaken Mark for a seal or other natural prey. Timothy was treated for shock and psychological trauma before being reunited with his mother. The incident prompted local authorities to install warning signs at the trailhead and conduct regular shark spotting patrols during peak swimming season. The tragedy highlighted the hidden dangers that can lurk beneath even the most pristine and peaceful-appearing coastal waters. Queensland's sun beat mercilessly over the vast, shimmering ocean as Liam Carter and his small crew worked their fishing boat just miles offshore. Liam was a seasoned fisherman, 38 years old, with weathered hands and a sturdy frame honed by years battling the sea's unpredictable moods. His crew, 3 men younger but equally experienced, trusted him implicitly. He knew these waters, where tuna thrived and danger lurked beneath. The boat was modest, a reliable vessel equipped for day trips, but no match for the ocean's raw power. That morning in mid-June 2022, they were hauling a large tuna, a prized catch that promised good money at the market. The air was thick with salt and sweat, and the waves gently rocked the craft as the sun climbed higher. Liam stood at the stern, gripping the heavy fishing line as the fish pulled fiercely. His muscles tensed, and every movement was practiced and precise. The crew around him moved steadily, hauling nets and securing gear. The ocean seemed deceptively calm, with a blue surface sparkling like glass. Without warning, the water erupted beside the boat. A massive shadow surged upward from the depths, a 16-foot great white shark, its body a blur of power and menace. The beast lunged with terrifying speed, jaws snapping wide. Liam barely had time to react before the shark struck, sinking its teeth deep into his left arm with a force that shattered bone and tore flesh. The impact sent Liam sprawling and the boat rocked violently. The sudden chaos capsized the vessel, throwing all aboard into the cold, churning sea. Waves crashed over the overturned hull as the crew fought to stay afloat amid the wreckage. Liam was dragged beneath the surface, his body twisting in the shark's grip. The ocean closed over his head, cold and dark, as the predator shook him violently. His breaths came in desperate gasps, fighting for air in the merciless depths. Above, his crewmates screamed, helpless as the shark's shadow vanished beneath the waves. The remaining fishermen struggled to reach shore, their hands raw from grasping slippery debris. Frantic radio calls went out, and a search was launched immediately, involving Coast Guard vessels and rescue helicopters. Hours turned into days, and the ocean yielded no sign of Liam's fate. On the third day, a grim discovery was made. Liam's body was found tangled in fishing lines, marked by deep bite wounds consistent with the attack. The extensive trauma confirmed what no one dared hope otherwise: he had not survived. The news devastated his family, who had watched and waited with fading hope. The fishing community, close-knit and tough, mourned the loss of one of their own. Authorities investigated the incident, examining the circumstances and safety measures in place. Liam had followed routine protocols, wearing a life jacket and working with his crew. Yet none could protect him from the sheer force of nature's deadliest hunter. Debates erupted over fishing safety, with some calling for stricter regulations and improved protective gear for fishermen operating in predator-rich waters. Others argued that the ocean was inherently dangerous, and such risks were part of the job. The tragedy highlighted the fragile line between livelihood and survival for those who work on the water. Environmental experts noted that great white shark populations off Queensland had been increasing in recent years, a sign of ecological recovery and a growing challenge for coastal industries. The balance between conservation and human safety became a heated topic, drawing attention from politicians, scientists, and local communities alike. For Liam's family, the loss was immeasurable. His wife and 2 young children faced a future without the man who had been their anchor, their protector. Friends and neighbors rallied to support them, sharing stories of Liam's kindness, skill, and love for the sea. Memorial services were held, honoring the fisherman who had dedicated his life to the ocean's demands. The waters off Queensland remained a place of beauty and danger, where the sun's glare hid the shadows beneath. Fishermen like Liam Carter accepted the risks inherent in their trade. Still, his death was a stark reminder that even experience and caution could not always shield against the ocean's fury. In the months following the attack, safety organizations introduced new training programs to educate fishermen about shark behavior and emergency response. Innovations in gear, such as protective suits and alarm devices, were tested but had yet to become standard. The incident underscored the need for awareness and preparedness in waters home to apex predators. Though Liam was gone, his legacy endured, etched in the memories of those who knew him and the ongoing conversation about human coexistence with the wild sea. His story was retold with reverence and sorrow, a cautionary tale of the ocean's unforgiving power and the unpredictable nature of its deadliest hunter. The great white sharks continued to roam the deep blue, creatures of instinct and shadow, indifferent to human tragedy, yet forever linked to it by fate and fear. Off the coast of Queensland, the sea held its secrets tightly, a vast and mysterious world where man's mastery was limited and survival was never guaranteed. For Liam Carter, the sea was home and adversary, a force that gave life and took it away in a single violent moment. His death was a solemn testament to the perilous dance between humans and nature, a reminder that power was absolute and mercy rare in the wild ocean. The morning off Praslin Island had been nearly perfect. Clear skies, warm water, and visibility that stretched for meters below the surface. Alain, 33, tall and athletic with a calm, patient presence, had been working as a marine guide in the Seychelles for nearly 8 years. He had led countless snorkeling excursions, guiding guests through coral gardens and fish-rich shallows. This particular outing had gone smoothly. The current was gentle, and the group of 7 tourists, mostly European honeymooners, had followed instructions well. They were just finishing their final swim of the day. The catamaran drifted nearby, anchored in a calm cove. Alain floated a few meters from the group, scanning the water beneath them with the casual alertness of experience. The coral reef below shimmered with darting fish, and everything felt exactly as it should for a few moments, peaceful and predictable. Then, he saw it. A large, slow-moving but deliberate shape emerged from the blue beyond the reef's drop-off. At first, it was just a shadow. broad and gliding, but sunlight revealed the tiger-like stripes running down its side as it turned. A tiger shark at least 4 meters long circled slowly beneath the group. Alain's pulse quickened. He raised one arm calmly, signaling the snorkelers to swim back to the boat. Most didn't understand the urgency, but they followed his gesture. He remained where he was, treading water, watching the shark as it moved closer. His training had taught him that tiger sharks were curious, sometimes bold, but rarely aggressive without cause. Still, he wasn't taking chances. He locked his eyes on the shark, staying between it and the group as they kicked toward the boat's ladder. The shark dipped beneath him, briefly disappearing, then reappeared farther off, circling wide. Alain kept his breathing steady and legs still, hoping the shark would lose interest. But it didn't. Without warning, it surged upward with terrifying speed. One moment it glided, the next it was a blur of muscle and jaws. It struck from below, its snout ramming into Alain's lower back, and then its jaws opened wide and clamped around his torso. The force of the bite knocked the air from his lungs, and blood gushed instantly into the water as the shark twisted its body and dragged him under. The tourists screamed, kicking frantically toward the ladder. One woman dropped her mask and nearly slipped off the steps. The water around Alain turned crimson, and for a moment he was gone, swallowed by the depths in a flurry of red. The second guide on the boat, Benoit, had been monitoring from the deck. He acted without hesitation when he saw the blood bloom beneath the surface and Alain disappear. He grabbed the long aluminum pole spear kept for emergencies and dove in, slashing through the surface and descending fast. He spotted the shark just below, circling again. Alain floated limply in the water, drifting upward slowly, his torso torn and limp. Benoit swam straight at the predator, jabbing the spear in its direction. The shark flinched but didn't immediately leave. It hovered for a moment, its dark eyes fixed on the motion, then flicked its tail and vanished into deeper water. Benoit reached Alain's body and wrapped an arm around his chest, hauling him up. The sea was thick with blood. The guests had returned to the boat, pale and shaking, several in tears. As Benoit lifted Alain onto the swim platform, the extent of the injuries became clear. The shark's bite had torn through his lower ribs, splitting flesh and bone. His abdomen was mangled. His face was pale, eyes open but unfocused, unmoving. Benoit started chest compressions as the captain radioed for emergency assistance, but it was no use. Alain had been underwater too long. His heart had stopped. His blood loss had been catastrophic. By the time the Coast Guard arrived, Alain's body had already been covered with a towel. Authorities arrived within an hour and began interviewing the shaken guests. The attack had occurred in an area known for occasional shark sightings, but this was different. There had been no baiting, no chumming, no provocation. It was a clear water, broad daylight strike on a human floating in the ocean. Marine biologists investigated and found evidence of fish scraps dumped from fishing boats earlier that morning not far from the reef. While not directly tied to the attack, it raised new concerns. Tiger sharks were opportunistic and had been known to associate certain areas with feeding. Alain was likely in the wrong place at the wrong moment, mistaken for prey in water, where recent feeding may have heightened the shark's aggression. His death marked the second fatal shark attack in that part of the Seychelles in under a year. The local government reacted quickly, closing nearby beaches for a week and suspending all snorkeling and diving tours around Praslin. Tour operators were ordered to reassess their safety protocols, including improved wildlife monitoring, stricter waste disposal regulations, and better emergency training for guides. Alain's death shook the close-knit community of marine workers. He had been respected, known for his steady nature and deep understanding of the sea. Tourists often praised him for making them feel safe in the open water. His final act, staying behind to protect his group, was seen as both heroic and tragic. 2 days later, a memorial was held on the beach. Locals and guests lit candles and placed flowers in the sand. Some threw wreaths into the surf. Others stood silently, staring out at the horizon. The ocean that had taken Alain was still and calm again, as if nothing had happened. But it had. In the days that followed, conversations began to change. Guides spoke more openly about close encounters. Tourists asked harder questions. Safety, once assumed, was now actively reassessed. Alain had trusted the water, known its moods, and respected its risks, but the sea didn't reason. The tiger shark that took him hadn't acted out of malice. It had simply followed instinct. And in a place that looked like paradise, that reminder cut deep. The Recherche Archipelago, located off the southern coast of Western Australia near Esperance, consists of over 100 islands and rocky outcrops scattered across 50 kilometers of treacherous waters. This remote region, approximately 700 kilometers southeast of Perth, has earned a reputation among sailors as one of the most challenging and dangerous coastal areas in the Southern Hemisphere. The archipelago's waters are notorious for sudden weather changes, hidden reefs, and strong currents that have claimed numerous vessels over the past 2 centuries. Daniel Hurst, a 42-year-old marine mechanic from Adelaide, had been sailing solo around the Australian coast for 3 months as part of a sabbatical from his boat repair business. His 35-foot sailboat, Wanderer, was a sturdy vessel he had personally renovated over several years, equipping it with all the necessary safety equipment and navigation tools for extended ocean voyaging. Hurst was an experienced sailor with over 20 years on the water, though he typically stayed closer to populated coastlines where assistance was readily available. On September 14, 2016, Hurst anchored Wanderer in a protected cove between Daw Island and Woody Island, seeking shelter from a weather system forecast to bring strong winds and rough seas. The anchorage appeared ideal, deep enough to accommodate his boat's draft while protecting it from the prevailing southwesterly winds that could make the area treacherous for smaller vessels. The morning of September 15th dawned clear and calm, with the storm system passing at night. Hurst conducted his usual morning inspection of the boat's systems and discovered that the propeller had become fouled with kelp and fishing line, likely picked up while maneuvering in the shallow waters near the anchorage. The fouling was severe enough to prevent the propeller from rotating freely, making it necessary to clear the obstruction before continuing his voyage. Hurst had dealt with similar problems numerous times during his sailing career, and the task of clearing a fouled propeller was considered routine maintenance that any competent sailor should be able to handle. He donned his wetsuit and gathered the tools he would need: a sharp knife for cutting through tangled line and kelp, plus a small pry bar for removing stubborn debris from the propeller blades. The water temperature in the cove measured approximately 16 degrees Celsius, typical for the region during late winter. Due to the clear conditions and minimal wave action, visibility beneath the surface was excellent, estimated at over 15 meters. The depth at the boat's anchorage was roughly 8 meters, shallow enough for Hurst to work comfortably while maintaining easy access to the surface. At 10:30 a.m., Hurst entered the water and swam beneath Wanderer to assess the extent of the fouling. The propeller was indeed heavily wrapped with kelp fronds and what appeared to be several meters of monofilament fishing line. The obstruction would require careful work to remove without damaging the propeller or the boat's steering system. Unknown to Hurst, his anchorage was situated near a seasonal feeding ground used by great white sharks during their migration along the southern Australian coast. The area's abundant seal populations and regular fishing activity created conditions that consistently attracted these apex predators. Recent research had identified the Recherche Archipelago as a critical habitat for adult great whites, though this information was not widely known among recreational sailors. Based on later analysis of bite marks and witness observations, the great white shark that would ultimately attack Hurst was estimated to measure approximately 4.5 meters in length. The shark had likely been patrolling the area for several days, drawn by the scent of fish remains from commercial fishing operations that regularly worked the waters around the archipelago. Hurst worked methodically to clear the fouled propeller, surfacing every few minutes to breathe and check his progress. The task was proving more difficult than anticipated, as the fishing line had become tightly wound around the propeller shaft and was difficult to cut without proper underwater tools. After 20 minutes of work, he cleared roughly half of the obstruction. At 10:52 a.m., Hurst surfaced to rest and called to his girlfriend Sarah, who was aboard Wanderer preparing lunch. He reported that the job was taking longer than expected, but that he was making steady progress. Sarah later recalled that Hurst appeared relaxed and confident, showing no concern about his safety or time in the water. The attack occurred at 10:54 a.m. as Hurst descended for his final dive to complete the propeller clearing. The great white shark approached from the deeper water beyond the anchorage, its approach masked by the boat's hull until the final moments before impact. Witnesses on a nearby fishing vessel later reported seeing a large shadow moving rapidly through the water just before the attack. The shark struck Hurst from below and behind, its massive jaws clamping down on his torso just below the ribcage. The force of the attack drove Hurst and the shark several meters through the water before they surfaced in a violent thrashing of foam and blood. Sarah, who witnessed the attack from the boat's deck, immediately recognized the severity of the situation and began implementing emergency procedures. The great white shark's initial bite had caused catastrophic damage to Hurst's internal organs and major blood vessels. The shark maintained its grip for approximately 15 seconds before releasing him and disappearing beneath the surface. Hurst remained conscious for several minutes after the attack, though he was clearly in severe shock from blood loss and trauma. Sarah immediately radioed a mayday call on Channel 16 while simultaneously deploying the boat's life ring and emergency ladder. 2 other vessels in the area, a commercial fishing boat and a pleasure craft, responded to the distress call and arrived within minutes of the attack. The crews of both vessels entered the water to assist with the rescue attempt despite the obvious presence of a large predator in the area. Hurst was pulled from the water within 5 minutes of the attack, but the severity of his injuries made survival unlikely, even with immediate medical attention. The nearest hospital was over 100 kilometers away in Esperance, and the rough seas made helicopter evacuation impossible. Despite the efforts of trained first responders among the rescue crews, Hurst succumbed to his injuries approximately 20 minutes after the attack. The Western Australia authorities investigated the incident and concluded that the attack was consistent with predatory behavior by a large great white shark. The investigation found no evidence of unusual shark activity in the area. It was determined that Hurst's death was the result of an unfortunate encounter with an apex predator in its natural habitat. The tragedy highlighted the inherent risks of solo sailing in remote waters inhabited by dangerous marine life. Maritime safety experts noted that Hurst had followed proper procedures and used appropriate safety equipment, but the attack's nature made survival unlikely regardless of preparation or response measures. Sarah returned to Adelaide with Wanderer and established a foundation in Hurst's memory dedicated to marine safety education and shark research. The incident became a case study used in sailing safety courses to illustrate the unpredictable nature of maritime hazards and the importance of risk assessment when operating in remote waters. Miles had spent years chasing waves and light, traveling from coast to coast with his cameras, drone, and old but reliable jet ski. That morning at Point Reyes, the surf was crisp and glassy under a cold blue sky. A northwest swell had pushed in clean sets that broke beautifully across the reef. Dozens of surfers were out, and Miles, 32, lean and tanned with a quiet, focused demeanor, hovered just outside the break zone, piloting his drone above the lineup. He loved mornings like that, cold but not punishing, the wind low, and the sea alive with motion and light. His drone cast a thin shadow on the water, gliding silently above the glassy surface as he guided it in slow arcs, capturing the surfers carving along the waves. When the ocean exploded behind him, he was in the rhythm, checking the drone screen, glancing at the surfers, adjusting his balance on the jet ski. Without warning, a massive white shark breached the surface just meters away. The water erupted with foam and fury, and the shark rose vertically, twisting slightly in midair. Miles saw it only for a split second, its pale belly and slate-gray back contrasting against the sky, its mouth slightly open, eyes locked onto something. It wasn't going for a surfer. It wasn't going for the ski. It was lunging directly at the drone's shadow, which had just passed over the shallows nearby. The shark's body partially crashed onto the jet ski's back. The impact jolted the craft forward violently. Miles was thrown forward, his chest slamming into the handlebars before the shark's snout slammed into his back, knocking the wind out of him. One of its teeth raked across his right thigh as its head slid off the ski, and it fell back into the sea with a violent splash. Miles tumbled into the water, disoriented. The breath ripped from his lungs. Cold rushed in around him like ice. Blood clouded the water around his leg, and pain bloomed instantly in his thigh, sharp and deep. He flailed instinctively but couldn't tell which way was up. When he broke the surface, gasping, he was only feet from the jet ski, which bobbed low from the damage. Then he saw the shark again, circling slowly beneath the surface, visible in the blue-green haze. It moved with terrifying ease, long tail sweeping side to side, closing the arc. It wasn't in a frenzy. It was curious now, maybe confused, maybe still hunting. Miles tried to swim for the jet ski, but his leg wouldn't cooperate. His thigh burned with every kick. The water tasted of salt and blood. Panic rose fast, almost faster than the pain, and he knew he couldn't outswim what was beneath him. Further inside, the surfers had seen it all. One of them, a local named Jonah, had watched the breach with disbelief. Now he was paddling toward the crash site, yelling, slapping the water to draw the shark's attention. A few others followed, wide-eyed, moving fast despite the risk. Jonah reached Miles first. He looped an arm under Miles's shoulder and pulled him upright. The jet ski was just feet away but drifting, and Miles was barely conscious. His face had gone pale, and blood continued to pulse from the gash in his thigh. Behind them, the shark made another slow pass, its dorsal fin cutting through the surface like a blade. The other surfers circled wide, slapping the water and splashing to keep the predator focused on the noise. Jonah heaved Miles toward the jet ski, struggling to keep his head above water. He kicked with all his strength, heart pounding, terrified the shark would strike again. With one final push, he got Miles close enough to hook an arm over the damaged back seat of the ski. Miles groaned, half-conscious, as Jonah scrambled up behind him. Together they rolled his bleeding leg onto the seat, blood dripping over the fiberglass. The shark moved away, then, finally, fading into deeper water. A faint trail of blood followed it, not from a bite, but from the thin lacerations on Miles's leg. The sea calmed again. The violence of the breach had passed, but the mark it left remained. The surfers helped guide the jet ski back toward the beach. It took nearly 20 minutes to get Miles ashore, where paramedics were waiting. His thigh was torn open along the outer muscle, but the damage wasn't as catastrophic as it could have been. The snout impact had bruised several ribs, and the tooth had missed the femoral artery by less than 2 centimeters. Surgery followed that same night. Doctors cleaned the wound, closed it with dozens of stitches, and told him how lucky he was. A few more inches and the shark would have taken his leg, or worse. He stayed in recovery for several days, visited by the surfers who helped him and the local news crews who wanted to hear the story. Marine biologists later reviewed the drone footage and came to a startling conclusion. The shark had breached at the drone's shadow, not because of Miles or the ski, but because the shadow resembled a seal gliding beneath the surface. The shark had likely mistaken it for prey and reacted with instinctive precision. It was one of the first confirmed cases where drone use may have indirectly triggered a shark breach. Experts warned that new tech, especially aerial devices casting strange shadows over water, could confuse apex predators that rely on vision and motion patterns to detect prey. Miles didn't blame the shark. He never had. He had understood it wasn't personal even during the attack, somewhere deep in his mind. The ocean belonged to creatures like that. He had just been in the wrong place at the wrong time, with a tool miming something nature didn't expect. Weeks later, Miles returned to the beach after the stitches came out, and the limp faded. He walked slowly to the surf's edge with his drone packed away, his jet ski still in storage, and a scar running the length of his thigh. He didn't bring a board. He didn't get a camera. He just stood in the water and watched the waves. The ocean didn't care who he was or what he brought with him. It moved like it always had, beautiful, indifferent, and wild. The hidden cove near Mazunte in Oaxaca, Mexico, had become a viral sensation among backpackers and adventure seekers. Tucked between cliffs and tangled jungle, the spot was famous for its 15-meter jump into a turquoise pool, where sunlight danced on the surface and echoing cheers bounced off stone walls. On June 18, 2024, the cove was crowded with travelers drawn by social media clips and adrenaline dreams. Among them was 27-year-old Elise Moreau, a French backpacker on a solo trip through Central America. Elise had arrived the night before with a group from her hostel, eager to chase what everyone promised would be a thrilling, unforgettable experience. Athletic and energetic, she had surfed in Bali, trekked through Patagonia, and cliff jumped in Thailand. Her Instagram chronicled it all, a scrapbook of daring stunts and sunburnt joy. The cove seemed perfect, beautiful, remote, and exhilarating. The tide had risen that morning, flooding the inlet with cool seawater. The cliffs rang with laughter as people lined up on the ledge, cheered each other on, and took turns leaping into the clear water below. It was hot, the kind of heat that made sweat bead instantly, and Elise welcomed the relief of the plunge, feeling weightless as she flew through the air and crashed feet first into the depths. She surfaced quickly, blinking salt water from her eyes, smiling, brushing hair from her face. No one saw the shadow glide from the mangrove channel connecting the cove to the deeper sea. The bull shark had been patrolling the murky water beyond the inlet, drawn inland by the season's change. Locals knew that early summer brought shifts in salinity and temperature, which often attracted bull sharks into the estuaries and brackish channels, but warnings were scarce. Tourism was too valuable, and the cove too popular, to scare people away. Just as Elise began to swim back toward the rocks, the shark rushed in from below, its powerful body slicing through the water with terrifying speed. It struck without hesitation, jaws locking onto her left arm from elbow to wrist. The force drove her underwater as bubbles exploded around her, and the surf swallowed her scream. The shark shook once, violently, its serrated teeth tearing through skin and tendon, then abruptly let go, retreating in a swirl of blood. Above, tourists screamed and stumbled back from the cliff's edge. Some dove into the water to help, others froze. Elise surfaced again, her eyes wide with shock, her mouth open in a silent cry as blood spread around her like a crimson halo. Her left arm flopped unnaturally, the lower half shredded, muscle and sinew exposed, fingers limp and colorless. A local tour guide named Mateo, who had been helping people climb up the rocks, reacted instantly. He leapt into the water, reaching Elise in seconds. Wrapping one arm around her chest, he kicked hard, pulling her to the ledge as she trembled, her body going limp. Blood streamed down her side and her breaths came short and fast. The moment they reached the rocks, he yelled for help, pressing a towel against her mangled arm, then unbuckled his belt and tightened it just above her elbow. Someone called emergency services. Others used their shirts to cover her, trying to keep her conscious. Elise's face had gone pale, lips tinged blue, but she clung to the edge of awareness, her body racked with pain. The tour boat arrived 15 minutes later, skimming across the waves, its crew leaping ashore with a stretcher. They stabilized her quickly, then carried her down the slope to the waiting boat, which raced toward a clinic in Puerto Angel. Doctors later said that the shark's bite had torn through most of the tendons and shredded skin from the joint down. The bones had been cracked, but not severed. Elise underwent emergency surgery that day, and then several more over the following weeks. Skin grafts were taken from her thigh and upper back. Surgeons rebuilt the shredded muscle as best they could, though her left hand remained partially paralyzed. Physical therapy began almost immediately, but the emotional toll cut just as deep. The attack made headlines across the country and then around the world. Videos from that day, though none showed the shark itself, captured the chaos. People screaming, others diving in, blood in the water, and the frantic scramble to help. Social media amplified the shock and triggered questions that wouldn't stay quiet. Journalists began asking how such a popular location had no posted warnings or safety precautions. Marine biologists pointed out that bull sharks used the mangrove channels nearby as feeding grounds during the early summer months. Several locals quietly admitted that sightings had occurred in the past, especially after heavy rains or seasonal changes. But tourism had boomed around the cove. No one wanted to scare off the visitors. The government investigated, interviewing tour operators, property owners, and local officials. Despite the connection between the cliff-jumping inlet and deeper shark-accessible waters, they confirmed that no official risk assessment was ever made. Pressure mounted for regulation. The cove was temporarily closed, patrols were increased, and new signs were posted warning of seasonal marine predator activity. For Elise, the damage had already been done. She stayed in Mexico for several months, enduring a long, painful recovery. Locals and fellow travelers raised funds to help with her medical costs. When she finally returned to France, her left arm bore the unmistakable scars of the attack: muscle loss, discoloration, and permanent limitations in movement. Her travel blog stopped. Her social media posts turned quiet. But over time, she shared what had happened. In interviews, Elise described not only the attack, but the fear that came after, the nightmares, the sudden panics, the guilt of surviving. She said she remembered the feeling of the water going still, the rush from below, and the crushing pressure of those jaws. She didn't blame the shark. She blamed the silence, the absence of warnings, the failure to inform travelers of what lurked beyond the beauty. The cliff-jumping cove eventually reopened, but never with the same carefree energy. New regulations require guides to carry emergency kits and keep swimmers closer to the rocks. Tour groups shrank, and though people still came to jump, many paused, looking into the water longer than before, imagining what could rise from the depths without warning. Elise's story remained a cautionary tale, an unforgettable reminder that danger can be only a heartbeat away, just beneath the surface, in places where wild beauty meets human thrill. The glass-bottom boat moved slowly over the deep blue water near Gansbaai, South Africa, drifting lazily above one of Earth's most notorious great white shark feeding zones. It was a warm, windless morning, and the sea was unusually calm. The clear water below revealed the haunting beauty of the ocean floor and the flickers of shadow that moved like ghosts beneath the surface. 6 Russians were among the 12 tourists on board, part of a package tour that promised sightings of massive sharks in their natural environment. Victor, a retired engineer in his late 60s, fond of wildlife photography, stood near the front with his wife Irina, who kept clutching his arm nervously. Nearby, a younger couple, Alexei and Tatiana, both in their early 30s and on their honeymoon, took photos through the scratched glass panels beneath their feet. The boat's crew consisted of 2 local guides and the captain, who had over 20 years of experience navigating these waters. The ship was sleek but light, with reinforced glass flooring that allowed passengers to peer into the sea. It had been inspected, certified, and cleared for shark tours just weeks before. No one expected what would happen next. Just before noon, the sea around the boat changed. The clear water darkened as shadows began to form below the hull. The captain eased the motor down, letting the ship drift naturally. The tourists leaned over the railing or stared down through the glass, eager for their first real look at the sharks. Then came the ripple. A massive shape surged upward from the depths, a pale underbelly followed by a dark back and wide tail. And in a violent flash, a huge great white shark erupted from the water, slamming its full weight into the starboard side of the boat. The impact was thunderous. Glass shattered. People screamed and fell to the deck. Water sprayed over the side and flooded across the cracked panels. One of the tourists, a young Russian named Andrei, lost his footing and slid across the slick surface. His hands clawed at the rail but found only wet fiberglass. A second hit from the shark shook the boat again, and Andrei was flung overboard, disappearing into the churning water. Panic broke loose. Victor tried to pull Irina to her feet as another crack opened along the floor. The boat tilted slightly, taking on water quickly. Some passengers clung to railings or each other, while others scrambled for life jackets. The crew shouted instructions, but they were drowned by fear and the rising sound of chaos. Then came a scream, short, sharp, and cut off too soon, as Alexei slipped through a shattered section of the side rail. He hit the water hard, and within seconds, a trail of red spread around him. The shark, a giant male estimated at over 17 feet, moved with terrible speed. Its jaws closed around Alexei's torso and pulled him under before he could scream again. Blood surged to the surface in a thick cloud. Still on the deck, Tatiana reached for him but was pulled by the sudden motion of the boat. She crashed into a bench and rolled toward the broken edge. Her leg slipped through a jagged gap, and she tried to scream, but her voice cracked with fear. Before anyone could help her, a second shark emerged, smaller but no less lethal. It lunged at her leg, and in an instant she was gone too, yanked over the side with a splash and a trail of blood that turned the sea crimson. The remaining passengers scrambled toward the boat's center, where the damage was least. Water rose rapidly through the floor, gushing up between broken panels. One man, bleeding from a cut to his arm, held tightly to the railing as he watched the water turn thick with red foam and moving shadows. The captain radioed for help, his voice shaking, urging the Coast Guard to hurry. He yelled to his crew to distribute the remaining life jackets. They worked quickly, helping injured passengers cling to debris or intact hull sections. Victor held onto Irina, both soaked and trembling. He watched the blood in the water and the sleek fins slicing through the waves. The sharks circled, as if waiting for the boat to tip further. One of them slammed its head against the hull again, testing its strength. Some tourists tried to use broken seats and benches to patch holes in the flooring, but water kept coming in. The boat wasn't sinking fast but steadily. Its engine was dead, and its radio barely worked. Rescue boats arrived 20 minutes later, alerted by the captain's broken transmission and the GPS distress signal. When they reached the scene, the rescuers found the water stained red and the boat dangerously low in the sea. The surviving tourists were pulled from the deck one by one. Some were crying and others were too shocked to speak. 3 bodies were missing. The sharks had vanished by then, disappearing into the deep just as quickly as they had come. Victor was the last to leave the boat. He clutched a piece of torn cloth soaked in blood. Irina had lost her shoes and part of her sleeve in the chaos, but she survived. Her face was pale, her hands shaking as she gripped the side of the rescue boat. In the aftermath, marine officials studied the damaged vessel. They found that although the glass bottom had been rated for wildlife viewing, it had not been designed to withstand full-force breaches by massive sharks. There had been no secondary containment layer, steel mesh or safety railing bolted with ocean-grade fittings. Every flaw had been exposed in seconds. 3 lives were lost. Their bodies were never recovered. The company suspended all glass-bottom tours immediately. Authorities cited design vulnerabilities and inadequate emergency protocols. But in Gansbai, known for its great whites, many locals believed something deeper had gone wrong. The sea had given its warning, and no glass, no matter how clear, could ever protect against a predator built by nature to dominate. Morning air off Guadalupe Island was crisp and salty, carrying the unmistakable scent of the sea. British wildlife filmmaker Owen Shaw had dreamed of this moment for years, filming great white sharks in their natural habitat, capturing raw, unfiltered footage that would bring viewers closer than ever to one of the ocean's most elusive predators. Known for his daring style and insistence on immersive shots, Owen had earned a reputation for pushing boundaries. This trip in June 2021 was no exception. Owen was 38, lean and hardened by countless dives in challenging environments. His dark hair was cropped close, eyes sharp and alert beneath the surface, reflecting a passion that often outpaced caution. The Guadalupe expedition team was small but experienced, composed of divers, camera operators, and boat crew who understood the thrill and the risks involved in filming such a dangerous animal without the usual protective cage. The island's waters were famously clear, a deep blue that stretched endlessly under the sun. Sharks patrolled the depths, some reaching lengths of over 15 feet, their presence both awe-inspiring and menacing. For Owen, filming inside the cage was routine, safe, controlled, but the cage also limited his shots, making the shark seem distant and constrained. This time, Owen insisted on a freediver outside the cage, hoping for a more immersive view, a visceral connection that could not be replicated. The crew was tense, but trusting. They knew Owen's methods and had prepared meticulously for the dive, checking safety lines and ensuring quick access to the boat. Owen slipped into the water smoothly, the wetsuit clinging to his frame and fins propelling him toward the feeding zone. The sea was calm, and sunlight pierced the surface in brilliant columns. As Owen floated and scanned, waiting for the sharks to appear, minutes passed. Then suddenly, a massive shape emerged from the depths, a 15-foot great white. Its gray body was marked with the distinctive white underside, and its dark eyes reflected a primal intelligence. The shark approached slowly, circling with deliberate grace, curious but cautious. Owen remained still, breathing evenly through his snorkel, camera poised to capture every movement. The shark's powerful tail flicked, stirring the water around him. The moment felt suspended in time, man and beast locked in an ancient dance beneath the waves. As the shark circled closer, Owen decided to surface, needing to adjust his snorkel and communicate with the crew. He broke the surface smoothly, taking a breath when suddenly the great white lunged with explosive speed. Before Owen could react, the shark's massive jaws clamped down on his left shoulder and upper back with a crushing force. Pain erupted instantly, white-hot and sharp, tearing through muscle and flesh. The ocean churned around him, blood mixing with salt water as Owen struggled to break free. His lungs burned, panic surging as adrenaline flooded his system. The shark shook its head violently, trying to secure its grip, but Owen fought back with every ounce of strength. On the boat, crew members watched in horror as the water exploded with movement. Without hesitation, they dove in, urgently pulling Owen from the water. Hands gripped his arms and torso, hauling him aboard as the shark circled briefly before retreating into the depths. The cameras kept rolling, capturing the chaotic aftermath, the frantic rush of the crew, Owen's bloodied form, and the sea slick with crimson. Owen slumped against the side of the boat, breathing ragged, his vision blurred by pain and shock. The wound on his shoulder was deep, flesh torn away to reveal muscle and bone beneath. Blood flowed freely, soaking into his wetsuit. The crew applied pressure, wrapped him in towels, and radioed for medical evacuation. Despite the severity of his injuries, Owen's pulse remained strong. The emergency helicopter arrived swiftly, whisking him to the island's clinic where surgeons worked tirelessly to repair the damage. Multiple lacerations required stitches, and nerve damage was assessed as a serious concern. It would be months before Owen could regain full movement, and the emotional scars ran just as deep. News of the attack spread quickly across the wildlife filmmaking community and the general public. Critics condemned Owen's decision to dive without the cage, labeling it reckless and irresponsible. They argued that no shot was worth risking life and limb in such a dangerous manner. Shark conservation groups expressed sympathy but echoed concerns about the safety risks involved. Meanwhile, some shark behaviorists offered a different perspective. They suggested the bite may have been a case of misidentification, an exploratory or defensive reaction rather than a deliberate attack. Sharks sometimes mistake unfamiliar shapes for prey or threats in the dim, shifting underwater light, especially if movements are sudden or erratic. These experts defended the practice of uncaged filming with strict protocols, though they acknowledged the inherent dangers. Owen, for his part, refused to accept criticism lightly. His passion for sharks and their conservation was genuine, rooted in years of study and respect for these apex predators. However, the attack changed his outlook profoundly. In the weeks after his release from the hospital, he began to reconsider the balance between risk and reward. When he finally returned to the water, it was inside the familiar metal cage that had once seemed a barrier to authenticity. He acknowledged that the cage provided essential protection, not just from physical harm, but from rash decisions fueled by adrenaline. The experience humbled him, reinforcing the unpredictable power of nature and the fragile thread by which humans hang in the wild. Owen resumed work with a renewed commitment to safety and education. His footage of the attack and recovery became part of a broader message about respecting wildlife boundaries. The segment on Guadalupe Island aired months later, showcasing stunning images of great whites, but with a sober narrative on the risks involved in wildlife filmmaking. Though his career was temporarily paused by injury, Owen emerged stronger, a cautious advocate for coexistence rather than confrontation. His story became a powerful reminder that beneath the ocean's beauty lurks a force that commands respect, one that should never be underestimated, no matter how skilled or passionate the human behind the camera. The great white sharks continued to patrol the waters off Guadalupe Island, enigmatic and indifferent to men's struggles. For Owen Shaw, the ocean remained a place of wonder and danger, where every breath and movement could mean the difference between life and death. The remote coastline near Bruny Island, Tasmania, had remained largely untouched by commercial development well into 2014, preserving its rugged beauty and pristine marine environment. Adventure Bay, a crescent-shaped inlet protected by towering headlands, had served as a popular swimming and camping destination for generations of Tasmanian families who appreciated its isolation and natural beauty. The waters surrounding Bruny Island were known to harbor significant populations of Australian fur seals, creating ideal hunting conditions for great white sharks. Marine biologists had documented great white sharks reaching lengths of over 5 meters in Tasmanian waters, though encounters with humans remained extremely rare due to the region's isolation. David Ellis, a 29-year-old wilderness guide from Hobart, had organized the camping expedition to celebrate his upcoming marriage to his longtime girlfriend, Rebecca. Ellis, who operated a small adventure tourism business, was known for his extensive knowledge of Tasmania's hidden beaches and meticulous attention to safety planning. The group consisted of 4 close friends, Ellis and Rebecca, Maximilian Thornbury, a photographer from Melbourne, and Serafina Kowalski, a marine biology graduate student. The camping trip had been planned for months, with Ellis selecting Adventure Bay specifically for its combination of scenic beauty and recreational opportunities. The group intended to spend 3 days exploring the area's hiking trails, photographing wildlife, and enjoying the pristine beach environment. On the evening of February 18, 2014, the group established their campsite on the beach, approximately 100 meters from the waterline. The evening began with a traditional campfire dinner featuring fresh seafood purchased from local fishermen. As darkness settled over the bay, the group was treated to one of the most spectacular natural displays they had ever witnessed. A full moon rising over the calm ocean, creating a silver pathway across the water. The combination of clear skies, calm conditions, and brilliant moonlight created an almost magical atmosphere. Thornbury suggested that the exceptional lighting conditions would be perfect for night photography, while Kowalski expressed interest in observing nocturnal marine life. The unusually warm February evening, with air temperatures above 22 degrees Celsius well after sunset, made the prospect of a moonlight swim particularly appealing. Despite his cautious nature and extensive experience with Tasmanian coastal conditions, Ellis was influenced by the seemingly perfect conditions and his friend's enthusiasm. The water appeared completely calm, with virtually no wave action and exceptional visibility due to the bright moonlight. He carefully assessed swimming conditions before agreeing to the group's proposal for a brief swim. The 4 friends entered the water at approximately 10:30 p.m., with temperatures around 18 degrees Celsius. They remained close to shore initially, staying within 20 meters of the waterline and maintaining visual contact with their campfire on the beach. The moonlight provided sufficient illumination to see each other and monitor the swimming conditions. After swimming for approximately 15 minutes, the group began to feel more confident and gradually ventured into slightly deeper water. Ellis, the strongest swimmer among the group, moved approximately 40 meters from shore, while his friends remained closer to the beach. The water depth in his position was roughly 4 meters. Kowalski later reported that she had been floating on her back, admiring the moon's reflection when she heard Ellis call out. Initially, she assumed he was simply enjoying the experience. However, when she turned toward his position, she observed an unusual disturbance in the water around him. The great white shark, estimated to have been between 4.5 and 5 meters in length, had approached Ellis from below and behind, using the moon's position to mask its approach. The attack was swift and devastating, with the shark's powerful jaws clamping down on Ellis's right thigh and hip area. The force of the bite immediately caused massive trauma to major blood vessels and bone structures. Ellis disappeared beneath the surface within seconds, pulled down by the shark's tremendous weight and power. The 3 remaining swimmers heard his brief scream before he vanished into the dark water, leaving only churning foam and the gradually spreading darkness of blood in the moonlit sea. The 3 survivors reached shore within minutes and immediately activated emergency beacons while attempting to spot Ellis in the water. Rebecca used her mobile phone to contact emergency services, though the remote location meant rescue resources would require considerable time to reach the scene. Rescue vessels from the Tasmania Police Water Operations Unit arrived at Adventure Bay at approximately 1:15 a.m., followed by volunteer marine rescue teams. Search and rescue operations continued throughout the night and the following day, utilizing boats, helicopters, and specialized diving teams. Ellis's body was recovered the following afternoon in approximately 15 meters of water, roughly 200 meters from where the attack had occurred. The post-mortem examination confirmed that Ellis had sustained injuries consistent with a great white shark attack, with fatal trauma to his upper leg and hip region. Marine biologists noted that the attack pattern suggested predatory behavior, possibly triggered by Ellis's movements being mistaken for those of a seal. The incident marked the first recorded fatal shark attack in Tasmanian waters during nighttime hours, leading to extensive research into nocturnal shark behavior patterns. The tragedy deeply impacted the local community and prompted comprehensive reviews of safety guidelines for nighttime swimming in remote coastal areas. Adventure Bay now features permanent warning signs about the risks of nocturnal marine activities, serving as a lasting reminder of that moonlit February night when the ocean claimed one of Tasmania's most experienced wilderness guides. The morning sun was just beginning to warm the crystal-clear waters off the coast of Maui as Sarah and James Collins slipped quietly into the sea. Newlyweds in their late 20s, they had arrived on the island just days before, eager to celebrate their honeymoon with a shared passion for adventure and nature. Sarah, a graphic designer from Seattle, was known for her fearless spirit and curiosity, while James, a high school teacher from Portland, was steady and calm, a grounding force in their relationship. Both had dreamed of exploring Hawaii's famous coral reefs, and now, with snorkeling gear in hand, they floated together on the surface, ready to dive into the vibrant underwater world. The water was a breathtaking shade of turquoise, warm and inviting. Beneath them, a sprawling coral reef bloomed with color and life. Parrotfish nibbled on coral, iridescent angelfish darted past, and the gentle sway of sea fans created an otherworldly dance. The sun filtered through the water, casting dappled light on the sandy ocean floor below. It was a moment of perfect tranquility, a snapshot of paradise they hoped would remain etched in their memories forever. Their laughter bubbled quietly beneath the waves as they pointed out fish and admired the reef's beauty. James stayed close to Sarah, his hand sometimes brushing hers, a simple gesture of comfort and connection. They had been through many challenges as a couple, but nothing quite like what was about to unfold. Suddenly, a shadow passed swiftly beneath them. A sleek, torpedo-shaped body glided with astonishing speed and precision. A mako shark. Known for being the fastest sharks in the ocean, makos were rarely aggressive toward humans, but their curiosity and lightning-quick reflexes made them unpredictable. The shark circled cautiously, its dark eyes scanning the couple with a cold, calculated interest. Sarah caught sight of the shark first. A mix of excitement and unease flickered through her. She tried to alert James with a gentle nudge, but before either could react fully, the mako's powerful body surged upward with frightening speed. The water erupted around them as its jaws snapped closed on Sarah's right calf, teeth biting deep into muscle and skin with savage force. Pain exploded through Sarah's leg like a bolt of lightning, sharp and searing. Her body jerked reflexively, panic flooding her senses. The taste of salt mixed with the metallic sting of blood as the ocean around her churned violently. James's heart pounded wildly, adrenaline surging through his veins as he lunged to her side. He grabbed her arm tightly, pulling her away from the shark's grasp as it thrashed momentarily, then darted into the blue depths. Blood spread quickly in the water, staining the once pristine scene with vivid crimson. Sarah's leg was a mangled mess, skin torn away, muscle shredded, and deep puncture wounds bleeding profusely. Her breath came in shallow, painful gasps as she clung desperately to James. The moment's terror was raw and overwhelming, yet beneath it lay a fierce determination to survive. Together they fought the choppy waves, struggling to reach the boat waiting not far away. Above the surface, crew members shouted and splashed, throwing ropes and life rings. The captain leaned over the side, hauling them aboard with urgency and care. James supported Sarah's weight, careful not to worsen her injury, while medics immediately set to work applying pressure bandages to stem the bleeding. Despite the grave nature of her wounds, Sarah remained conscious, eyes wide with shock and pain, but focused. James's presence was a steadying force amid the chaos, his calm voice offering unspoken reassurance. The minutes stretched long and torturous as they prepared for evacuation to a medical facility, where surgeons awaited to begin the painstaking process of saving her leg. In the hours that followed, Sarah endured multiple surgical procedures. Tendons were repaired, muscles stitched, and infection was aggressively fought with antibiotics. The pain was relentless, yet her resolve never faltered. Each breath, each movement was a battle, but she faced it with quiet courage. James was by her side, a constant companion who refused to leave her alone, offering strength when her own wavered. The emotional toll was immense. Sarah struggled with moments of despair, the vivid trauma replaying in her mind. The ocean that had once been a place of joy and discovery now seemed a realm of danger and loss. But James's unwavering support was a lifeline, anchoring her through the darkest hours. Their shared ordeal transformed their honeymoon from a carefree escape into a profound journey of survival and renewal. Local authorities and marine experts weighed in on the incident, which quickly became a topic of discussion among residents and tourists alike. The attack was rare, but it served as a stark reminder of the unpredictability of wild animals, even those generally regarded as non-aggressive. Mako sharks, prized for their speed and power, could act defensively when startled or curious, especially in areas where humans intrude on their territory. For Sarah and James, the attack deepened their connection. Fear had momentarily threatened to tear them apart, but instead, it forged a new bond of trust and gratitude. James's courage under pressure and Sarah's resilience in recovery revealed layers of strength neither had fully known before. The ocean's wild unpredictability tested their love, but did not break it. Months passed as Sarah underwent intensive physical therapy, relearning how to walk and move without pain. James adjusted his life to support her healing, balancing work with caregiving and always being patient and present. The couple found solace in small victories. Sarah's first pain-free steps, moments spent laughing despite the scars, quiet evenings spent reflecting on what they had endured. Their story became a quiet inspiration in their community, a testament to human resilience in the face of nature's power. They spoke less about the attack and more about the lessons it taught: the need for respect for wild animals, the fragility of life, and the strength found in love and companionship. The ocean remained in their lives with all its beauty and danger, a reminder of the fine line between wonder and peril. Sarah and James vowed never to let fear overshadow their passion for exploration, but they carried with them a newfound respect and humility toward the sea's mysteries. The Mako shark continued to glide through the deep Hawaiian waters, a swift guardian of the reefs, indifferent to the human stories etched on the surface. For the Collins couple, the ocean was no longer just a backdrop for adventure. It was a powerful force that had tested their limits, challenged their courage, and ultimately deepened their bond in ways they had never imagined. Through pain and healing, fear and hope, their love endured, stronger and more profound, forged by the jaws of a predator and the unbreakable will to survive together. Waters surrounding Kaikoura, on New Zealand's South Island, have served as a premier marine wildlife destination since the 1980s, when the town transformed from a struggling fishing community into an internationally recognized whale-watching hub. In 2016, these nutrient-rich waters off the Canterbury coast became the site of an extraordinary encounter that would challenge scientists' understanding of orca behavior and highlight the unpredictable nature of human-wildlife interactions. The Kaikoura Canyon, a massive underwater trench that begins just 500 meters from shore, and plunges to depths exceeding 1,000 meters, creates unique oceanic conditions that support abundant marine life, including sperm whales, dolphins, and the region's resident orca population. Orcas, known scientifically as Orchinus orca, are the ocean's apex predators, capable of reaching lengths of up to 9 meters and weighing as much as 6 tons. The Kaikoura region hosted a resident pod of approximately 25 orcas that marine biologists had studied for over 2 decades. These intelligent cetaceans exhibited complex social behaviors and sophisticated hunting techniques, primarily targeting stingrays and other bottom-dwelling species in the shallow coastal waters. Both researchers and tourists typically welcomed their presence in the area, as orcas were generally considered non-threatening to humans. Barnaby Whitmore, a 45-year-old marine insurance adjuster from Christchurch, had planned the sailing expedition to celebrate his recent promotion and an opportunity to share his passion for sailing with his family. Whitmore had been sailing for over 20 years, with extensive experience in New Zealand's challenging coastal waters. He was joined by his wife Cordelia, their 16-year-old daughter Anastasia, and his brother-in-law Reginald Pemberton, a marine engineer from Wellington. The family had chartered a 38-foot Beneteau Oceanus, named Southern Cross, for a week-long sailing holiday along the South Island's east coast. On the morning of November 14, 2016, the Whitmore family departed from Kaikoura Marina to spend the day whale watching and enjoying the region's spectacular marine environment. Weather conditions were ideal for sailing, with light winds from the southwest, calm seas, and excellent visibility. The forecast predicted settled conditions throughout the day, making it perfect for wildlife observation and recreational sailing. The Southern Cross was equipped with standard safety equipment, including life jackets, emergency flares, an emergency position indicating radio beacon, and an inflatable life raft. Whitmore conducted a thorough safety briefing with his family before departure, reviewing emergency procedures and ensuring everyone understood their roles in case of unexpected situations. The boat's diesel engine was in excellent condition, and all navigation equipment functioned normally. Approximately 3 nautical miles northeast of Kaikoura Peninsula, the family encountered their first marine wildlife of the day. A pod of dusky dolphins approached the sailboat, delighting the crew with their playful antics and acrobatic displays. Anastasia captured numerous photographs of the dolphins as they rode the boat's bow wave, creating memories that would later become precious reminders of the day's events. After nearly an hour observing the dolphins, Whitmore continued sailing toward the deeper waters where sperm whales were frequently sighted. The engine ran low throttle to maintain steerage while the family scanned the horizon for whale spouts. The boat's depth sounder indicated they were moving over the edge of the Kaikoura Canyon, where the seafloor dropped rapidly from 50 meters to over 300 meters depth. At approximately 1:30 p.m., Cordelia spotted an adult male orca's distinctive tall dorsal fin approximately 200 meters off the starboard bow. The massive cetacean, later estimated to be nearly 8 meters in length, was swimming slowly parallel to their course. Whitmore reduced engine speed and adjusted course to maintain a respectful distance while allowing his family to observe the magnificent creature. The orca's initial behavior appeared completely normal, with the whale surfacing regularly to breathe and showing no signs of agitation or distress. Marine wildlife guidelines recommended maintaining a distance of at least 150 meters from orcas, and Whitmore was careful to comply with these regulations. The family watched in amazement as the whale's distinctive black and white coloration became visible through the clear water. After several minutes of parallel swimming, the orca's behavior changed. The whale started swimming increasingly tight circles around the sailboat, occasionally slapping its massive tail flukes against the water surface. Whitmore recognized these actions as signs of agitation and began preparing to increase distance from the whale. However, the orca's behavior escalated dramatically before he could take evasive action. The whale suddenly accelerated toward the sailboat, approaching from the port quarter at considerable speed. Whitmore warned his family to hold on as the 6-ton whale collided with the boat's hull just aft of the mast. The impact was tremendous, causing the entire vessel to shudder and heel dramatically to starboard. The force of the collision cracked the fiberglass hull near the waterline and damaged the rudder assembly. Before the crew could assess the damage or react to the first impact, the orca surfaced alongside the boat and prepared for a second attack. This time, the whale approached from directly astern, using its powerful tail to propel itself toward the sailboat's transom. The second collision was even more violent than the first, with the orca's massive head striking the boat's stern section with enough force to crack the rudder post and damage the steering mechanism. The second strike's impact threw Whitmore and Anastasia over the boat's port side into the 14°C water. Whitmore hit the water first, landing heavily on his right side and immediately feeling sharp pain in his rib cage. Anastasia entered the water seconds later, her impact cushioned somewhat by her father's presence, but still causing her to submerge in the frigid ocean completely. Cordelia and Reginald, who had managed to maintain their grip on the boat's safety lines, immediately began rescue procedures. Reginald threw life rings toward the two swimmers, while Cordelia started the engine and maneuvered the damaged boat toward their position. The orca remained in the immediate area, swimming in large circles around the sailboat, but showing no further aggressive behavior toward the people in the water. Despite the pain in his ribs, Whitmore kept himself and Anastasia afloat until Reginald could pull them back aboard the boat. The rescue operation took approximately 8 minutes, during which the orca continued its circling behavior but maintained a distance of at least 50 meters from the ship. Marine biologists later theorized that the whale's behavior may have been triggered by the boat's engine vibrations or propeller noise, which could have been misinterpreted as territorial intrusion. Once back aboard, Whitmore was found to have sustained 3 fractured ribs and severe bruising along his right side. Anastasia suffered from mild hypothermia and shock, but had no serious physical injuries. The boat's damage assessment revealed a cracked hull, a damaged rudder, and a compromised steering system that made navigation hazardous. The family activated their emergency beacon and was rescued by the Kaikoura Coast Guard within 2 hours. The incident prompted extensive research into orca behavior patterns and revised guidelines for marine wildlife encounters in New Zealand waters.